With us for our first session of our speaker series, we have Salih Muhammad. And so I'm just going to give a little biography about Salih. Raised in East Oakland, California, Muhammad strives to embody the principles of service, sacrifice, and selflessness. For much of his life, he has become committed to striving towards the liberation of Black people at home and abroad. Muhammad believes that Black excellence destroys white supremacy and strives to demonstrate this excellence daily. As a high school student, Muhammad co-founded a Black student-owned and operated coffee shop. In 2009, he continued pursuit of knowledge. In 2009, continued pursuit of knowledge led him to the University of California, Berkeley, where he excelled as a Black student organizer on campus. His favorite quote is from Frantz Fanon, who stated, "Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it, in relative opacity." Muhammad believes that his generation must carry the mantle of liberation toward its next peak, actualizing the visions of our ancestors. He believes this generation must practically apply the concepts of do for self and self-determination for effectively organizing systems and people. Currently, Muhammad is the executive director of the African Black Coalition, ABC, a statewide Black youth organization that mobilizes the Black student unions in the 18 California campuses. ABC seeks to transform the Black condition by training a new crop of Black student leaders to organize our intellectual and economic resources. At 23 years old, he became the principal and director of an independent Black school and is currently a frequently touring speaker. And so now I would like to introduce Brother Salih to go ahead and speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really honored, I'm thankful, and I'm excited to be a part of such a wonderful program. As Brianna mentioned, my name is Brother Salih. I'm from East Oakland, California. I've been to Merced campus probably 30 or 40 times at least. I love coming to Merced. Sorry that we have to do this over Zoom, but I think that the time in which we are living is very clear that we should take the necessary precautions. I'm honored to participate in this phenomenal workshop series hosted by UC Merced STEP program, Strengthening Talents and Exploring Pathways. I believe that these types of programs are essential to the personal and professional development of students of color at UC Merced and elsewhere. Too often, unjust and exploitative systems of oppression work to render our talents irrelevant by limiting the choice of pathways that are open to our community specifically. As a consequence, although the state of California, and indeed the entire country, grows in the number of people of color, our universities don't seem to parallel that growth. So I've been asked to talk about diversity and resilience. And God willing, I'm a Muslim, so I will mention God's name. God willing, in today's session, I hope to draw from personal experience, data, and history to help us understand the significance, purpose, and methodology necessary for us to be resilient in spite of the lack of diversity that we frequently witness. More importantly, however, I hope to help us understand the greater meaning and significance of our lives in this context, and to draw lines of inspiration and guidance to help us live the lives that we ultimately desire to live. Unfortunately, we live in a world whose dominant and underlying theme is neither diversity nor resilience. As a Black man in America, I am clear from experience that our unjust society is built on an underlying premise and dominant theme, which is white supremacy. A constant perceived reality where people of color always find ourselves devalued and mistreated, with our lives constantly under threat. Always having to prove that we are worthy of the investment, always having to demonstrate that somehow our life is as valuable as the life of other people. And if not anything, the current coronavirus pandemic is yet another unfortunate example of this. As the world suffers, it is our people who suffer the most. It's not to say that we are here to compare, but the truth is we are our people's hope. Therefore, as young people, as young scholars, it is our obligation that we must have a proper understanding and analysis of the gross sorrows that our people endure. We must never forget that our people deserve better. And so when we look at the current context and climate, when we look at the disproportionate death rates that Black and brown folks are suffering during this pandemic, it is up to us to consider, what will we do to change the realities that our communities experience? Not what will we say, not just what will we research, but what will we do? Because our people have suffered for so long without anybody there to do something for us. And that is what many of our people are expecting out of us. How do we get us in a better condition? I love the concept of pathways and journeys that you are employing in your title. For what else is life other than a journey of self and community development? What else is life other than a long road? A path is a way or track laid down for walking or made by continual treading. It is a course of action or conduct. Who laid down our path? Who has established our criterion? Who tread the road upon which we walk as young people of color? I'm reminded of the words of the great Black national anthem that we often sing at our programs and events, titled "Lift Every Voice and Sing." And in the song we sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. And then it says, stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, yet with the steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. The road that we tread is stony. It is uncomfortable. It is difficult. But sometimes what we have to learn to appreciate and value is that the stoniness of the road has developed a callus in our feet that allows us to maintain resilience and to overcome obstacles that most other people are not able to meet and overcome. But because we have traveled and traversed along this stony road, we have been given a divine obligation, not just to get to the other side of the road, but our obligation now is to look back at those in our community who never had the opportunity to travel on this road that we find ourselves on. Our mothers and our fathers, our ancestors laid down their lives that we might trod upon this bitter road with hope that they had that a greater outcome might one day arrive. Will we make it? Will their dreams be fulfilled? Will our dreams be fulfilled? The soul yearns to meet with its destiny. But what inhibits us from accessing the power within ourselves as we tread this great world? The greatest journey we can trod is not merely the journey of acquiring a bachelor's or a master's degree, for that journey is temporal and it's insufficient to grant the soul and spirit its desired reward. This is why people can have all these letters and degrees of education, but still find themselves dissatisfied with life. It is because the goal of life, it is not merely to attain a degree and maybe get a decent job, but the goal of life is greater than that. And if we were to look and examine the conditions of our community, we would find that the educational attainment that we have had has not resulted in an overarching improvement of the quality of life that our people have. Not to beat a dead horse, but when we see a worldwide pandemic, and we see that increasingly it is Black and brown communities that are suffering the greatest in very little time. And we are suffering the greatest because it seems that no one seems to care enough to put in policies, procedures, and protocols to spare our precious lives. Then it tells us that somebody must care enough to use their time, their energy, their effort to see the transformation of our community's lives. Where can our minds, our hearts find rest and resolution that we desire? The greatest rest, resolution, and peace that we can find is the peace that is found when we have a proper and healthy respect for life. What is life? What is it that we can do in life to make life more enjoyable, to make life more deliberate, to make life more meaningful? My teacher taught me life is the sum total of all of our relationships. It is the sum total of all of our relationships. If we were to add up every relationship that we had, and we were to examine and analyze these relationships, we will come to a conclusion on what the quality of our life is. And so the first thing that we must do if we intend to have a better quality of life is that we must be resilient in developing healthy relationships. How do we relate to ourselves? How do we relate to our families? How do we relate to our friends? How do we relate to our community? Are we having the quality relationships from which we can derive joy, peace, and contentment of mind? Or have we not yet learned the skills necessary, the character necessary, the moral development necessary to have the quality of relationships that can guarantee the peace and contentment of mind that the soul yearns for? Life is the sum total of all of our relationships. So, as people that often find ourselves in marginalized and underrepresented communities, sometimes we get so caught up in the political games that the society puts us through. We get so caught up in fighting for what we naturally deserve that we miss out that the most important premise that gave us the kind of success that we've had in our lives so far is the fact that there was somebody near us that loved us, that gave to us, that supported us. And so we have to look in the mirror and consider, what is it that I can do? What is it that we can do to be a better supporter of the relationship that we have? And then my teacher taught me, life is a series of challenges, one after another. There's a passage in the Quran, which is the scripture of Muslims, that says, what is man but what he strives for? What are we in life except that which we go after? What are we except for that which we put our energy, our time, our efforts, our livelihood into? There is no easy successes in life. There's no easy wins. There's a great black leader out of Africa that once said, Amilcar Cabral, and he said, tell no lies and offer no easy solutions to the masses. Unfortunately, in the political climate we find ourselves in, very often, everyone wants to offer our communities easy solutions. Just go out and vote. And if you vote, your community will be better. Sorry, that hasn't worked. So we can't offer easy solutions to ourselves and to our people because there is no ease in progress. Progress requires, as a prerequisite, difficulty. After difficulty comes ease, not before. Ease comes after we have found a difficulty and work to conquer that difficulty. And when we conquer the difficulties of life, the soul internally gives us the unspeakable joy that we often desire. We don't have to turn to external forces to find joy and happiness. We can find joy and happiness if we could see the difficulties of life and exceed at them, excel at them, find success in them. Life is a series of challenges, one after another. In fact, we were created to create difficulty. Can you imagine what a child would say if it could speak after being born? Can you imagine how difficult it would describe that terrible ordeal? And although the ordeal of birth gave the child its existence, I'm sure none of us would want to do that again. And that is to say that it is built into the nature of the dynamic of the human being that we are made to face difficulty. We don't remember what it felt like to go through that difficulty. You may not remember what it felt like to learn how to crawl, and then to learn how to walk, and then to learn how to talk, and then to learn how to run. But all of these things in our early life were difficulties that faced us that we had to consider and to learn, how do I overcome difficulty? And so life is a challenge. It's a struggle. And we should embrace the struggle, for in the struggle is the route or the pathway to self-development. Imagine if the child was not willing to learn how to walk, or was not willing to learn how to talk. and to engage and process and conquer those difficulties, then how will we have the beautiful society with the aspects of it that are beautiful? How will we have the aspects of the society that are beautiful if we were not willing to engage and overcome difficulty? So life is the sum total of all of our relationships. It's how we relate to one another. It is how we relate to our families and to our friends. Life is a series of challenges, one after another. How do we respond when we are faced with difficulty? Will we respond with resilience as our ancestors did and to continue to trod that stony road? Or will we turn back? And lastly, life ultimately is all about passing on to the next generation. Now, I know we're young and we may not be thinking about the next generation just yet, but what good is our lives if we don't make a contribution to those who come after us? Our life is temporary. We come and we will go. It's very temporary. And the question that we must consider in and with our lives is not what will we do for ourselves. What we must consider with our lives is what will we do for others. So Muhammad Ali, the great Muslim boxer out of America, said, service for others is the rent you pay for your right to be on the earth. We are but a chain, a small link in the greater chain or the greater journey that our people are having. So as we may have our individual journeys, an individual journey where we are growing and developing toward the ultimate aim of perfection of self. And as we are on that journey of self-development, we are also on a collective journey of human development, a collective journey of community development. But if we engage in the journey to develop self, but negate the journey to develop a community, then we will actually function as a poison to self and to community. For what do people remember in the end? They don't remember all that you did for yourself. We remember what it is that you did to make the world that you live in a better and a more meaningful place. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad once said, you can't measure up to the mountains. You're not tall enough to measure up to the mountains. You're not deep enough to go down with the valley. So take your place amongst the creatures of the earth. We live and we die as the insects live and die, as the animals live and die, the birds, the bees, the fish, they all live and they die. And so the question is not how great are you? The question is how great will your contribution be to something that is greater than yourself? Indeed, there have been examples before us. So we should look at the histories of the world to understand what was the end of those who did not serve their community. What is the result of not working for others? And the result is we don't know. Because when we do not service others, we don't go down in the narrative of the history as someone who made a contribution and a sacrifice for a cause that is greater than ourselves. It is when we sacrifice for those who do not have the privileged access that we have to education, to the academy, to research, to scholarship, when we sacrifice for those who will never see the light of day at UC Merced, that is when we are etching our name in the stone of eternity. Because through doing that work, our communities can remember us, not because we went to college. They will remember us because we made a sacrifice, a reasonable sacrifice, a contribution to ensure that our peoples and our communities could find themselves in a better condition tomorrow than what they are in today. So why are we here? You're here because you or your parents desired some level of an education. But what is that? Did our ancestors give their lives and struggle just so we can acquire a good degree, just so that we could get a decent job, just so that we could kick our feet up at night and sip some wine, and maybe have a house and a fence and a nice middle class life. Is this what our people struggle for? Is this the extent of their vision? Is this the totality of their dream? Or is there something greater? Is there a more meaningful purpose that they saw in their hope and their yearning and their desire that we acquire an education for ourselves? Education, my teacher taught me, is the torchlight for civilization. Not only is it a torchlight for civilization, it is a torchlight for ourselves. Look at the world that we are living in. It is dark. It is full of ignorance. The UC has its motto, fiat lux. Let there be light. Why? Because light represents knowledge. Light represents truth. And by means of knowledge or truth, we are able to receive or to have guidance in a darkened society. Could we really deny that this society is dark for our people? Could we really deny that this society is suffering from an inundation of lies and half-truths? Let there be light. You ever go camping out in a real dark environment where there's no unnatural light, just the light of the stars? What you'll notice is that you need light. You need a flashlight, and when you flick the flashlight on, the flashlight will give you a scope of sight that it might guide your pathway. But your path is only guided by the extent to which that light shines. You can't see or make decisions or have guidance past the scope of what that light points toward. Well, so it is with knowledge. The knowledge that we have prescribes for us a limit to our activity. Our problem as a people and as communities is so often we are deprived of knowledge. What knowledge? Not the knowledge of getting a degree, because many of us have degrees, and yet our overall collective condition has yet to improve. It is not merely the knowledge of how to pass a class and memorize for a test. It is the knowledge of self. It is the knowledge that the university and the sterile halls of academia often negate to provide for us. And that is a true understanding of who we are personally and collectively. The word education is actually derived from a Latin word, educere, which means to draw out or to bring out. Education is supposed to bring out of us what is already within us. It is not to fill our minds necessarily only. Education is actually supposed to bring out of us the natural inclinations of self, and that through bringing it out of us, we can perfect something within so that we can ultimately perfect something without. Knowledge is supposed to empower us to develop self. The body and the mind are a microcosm of the macrocosm. They are a small, congested form of what you can see anywhere and everywhere in the universe. But when we lack perspective of self, then we are unable to make the impacts on the larger environment that we hope to impact. After self-cultivation, education should bring us to a position where we can service self, family, community, nation, and then the world, and in that order. Unfortunately, oftentimes our education only inspires us or teaches us how to serve self and the world, while our families and our communities continue to suffer under the boot of poverty and oppression. How many generations of our peoples will have to want for food, clothing, and shelter when we have young people that are entering colleges across America? Every one of our purpose in life if we were to examine it, falls into one or of three categories. Often we are born to either help, to create, or to teach. How do we find your purpose in life? What is the route that we can take to specifically understand the intention for which you were born? The soul yearns, it desires to fulfill its destiny. We can never find true happiness unless and until we have identified the reason for our existence and we find ourselves living to fulfill that reason. That is why so many of our elders are dissatisfied in life. Though they earn a decent wage, they have yet to find what it is that they are actually here on this earth to do. We are all born with a universal purpose, a universal designation, meaning we're all born in a particular context where we are responsible for supporting and developing the overall and overarching development of our communities. It's universal. That should be in all of our minds. In all of our minds, we should have a notion that I have a duty and an obligation to someone and somebody beyond myself. But it's so weird because I've worked with Black college students for years and students of color for many years. And we all come to college saying that we want to do something for our communities. And somehow once we leave, and I kid you not, once we leave, our sense of obligation and duty to our communities becomes so myopic and short-sighted that we begin to believe that purchasing a house is the fulfillment of our duty to our communities. No. We have to have a grander vision, a vision that says, how do we ensure that our communities are a safe and decent place to live? How do I do my part to ensure that the places from which I came, that I can return to them and make them better? But how often in our post-collegiate career do we have plans to return from whence we came? How often in our post-collegiate career do we have the intention to ensure that the people that we left actually see the return on investment? How many parents and aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandpas had to invest to get you to where you are? And what return do they get on their investment? Yes, they might be proud of you for graduating. They might be proud of you for your 3.0 or 4.0, but that's not return on investment. The return on investment that our communities are looking for is for us to return to our communities and establish for our communities a better quality of life. Will we continue to wait on those who have not yet established it to all of a sudden begin to establish it? Do we really expect the Medicare system or the medical system that leaves our people uninsured and with a poor quality of treatment to be the same system that will prevent us from suffering the most from a pandemic? Did we really expect that those who have not cared and have not had the concern to ensure that our quality of life would be on an upward trajectory to be the same institutions to all of a sudden make that a reality because we went to college? I would offer that our communities are desperately, desperately, desperately hoping for, believing that we will one day breathe the bright lights that they envisioned when we were born. I rarely see a parent not say that their child is destined for greatness. I rarely see a parent say that their child is not unique and unusual. I rarely see a parent that does not believe that their child is going to do something great in the world. But I think our challenge is, how will we do that and not to do it in the ways of yesterday, but to do it in the ways of today. How will we solve the problems of today in ways that those problems of today do not continue to be problems tomorrow? So we all share a universal purpose, and then we share a personal purpose. That means if we want to make our communities better, what is it specifically that I must do or that I should do in order to do that? That is your personal purpose. How do we find it? Your personal purpose in life is the thing that you love to do and that you do best. The thing that you love to do and that you do best. And when you have found this thing that you love to do and do best, that is the reason for which you were born. And from that reason for which you were born, if you follow that pathway, you will find your ultimate and eventual success and happiness in life. My great teacher, Minister Farrakhan, said, happiness comes when a person understands their purpose for existence, and then they fulfill that purpose. And when one fulfills his or her purpose in life, the soul is satisfied. That soul has unspeakable joy. Nothing in creation can truly be happy if it is other than itself. To be happy is to be fulfilled. It is only when you fulfill your destiny and are in accord with the nature of your creation that real happiness takes place. Because real happiness gives you peace and contentment of mind. The result of true education is happiness. True education empowers us to find deep within ourselves the meaning for our existence. And then it gives us the knowledge, the tools, the skill sets, the means, and the methodology by which we can live that purpose out. That's true education. But we can't expect the university to be responsible for the totality of our learning experience. What are you doing to study yourself? What are you doing to examine yourself? What are you doing to examine and to study the context and the history from which your people came? Because that context and that history gives to yourself its nature. For nature is self. Nature is derived from what we experience and what those before us experience. And these things give to us our sense of being. What are you doing to study yourself? What are you doing to study your community, your history, your traditions, your trajectory? And how are these informing how you develop your life? True education results in happiness. So all of my life, I have been blessed to be in a position where I've constantly found the joy of living out what it is that I believe I have been meant to do. And what I would say to those who are graduating, the economy is about to be tougher than what it was a month ago. But the thing that we have to think about as we go into our post-collegiate career and our post-collegiate experiences, we have to be thinking long-term. How will the activity that I'm doing measure up to ensure that I find the joy in life that I naturally deserve? In conclusion, it's important for us as we leave our collegiate experience to leave college humble. Far too often we leave our collegiate experience and we leave with a false arrogance that allows us to go to our communities and tell them that their traditions are wrong. A false sense of arrogance that allows us to go to our communities and blame them for their condition. A false sense of arrogance that makes us feel that we have risen above the condition of the masses. And the truth is, no one of us can ever rise above the condition of the masses. I'm sorry, when the police pull you over, they don't ask you what college you went to. I'm sorry, when the employer sees your name and is deciding whether or not to hire, they don't ask you how good was your professor toward you. No one of us can rise above the condition of the masses. And so we are obligated to think about and to consider, what will I do to raise the condition of those who do not have access to the quality of education that you have? What kind of light shall you shine so that the world around you can be a better place? What kind of research will you conduct to ensure that your communities can get a further distance in life? If you are examining the quality of life that we have, if you are to examine the life longevity that we have, we are often living a life that is cut down prematurely. And this is because we are in need of young people that can come and help guide our communities so that we can find ourselves in a better and more efficient and a more beautiful trajectory for which we would take. But those are my comments for today. I hope I'm not too short. I don't know, I didn't set a timer or too long. Um, but I'm more than happy to take any questions that you all have. I hope that I said something that touched you and that might help you to see your purpose and the larger purpose for which we are serving. Thank you all so much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Brother Salih. That was a really great talk. Thank you. Yeah, and we got some hand claps going on, which you can do in the reactions tab if you didn't know that. Brianna is going to be taking lead in the facilitation of questions, and I think we have one that was posted in the chat.
Yeah, so our first question is from Abigail. She asks, how would one take reasonable steps to spark change in their community when you don't realize your personal limits with all the responsibilities we have as students that take on multiple roles?
Very good. Right now, as a student, one of the most important things you can do is be successful as a student. My teacher, Minister Farrakhan, taught me that Black excellence destroys white supremacy. And I think that statement bears true for all folks of color. When we demonstrate excellence, it's through our excellence that we actually tear down stereotypes and notions of white supremacy. And so when I'm looking to change or make impacts in communities, there are two things that I'm always looking to offer: my word and my example. And through these two things, I'm hoping to impact and change the lived experiences of the people that I'm hoping to touch. My words mean I must study my people enough. I must study myself enough to be able to offer meaningful and consequential advice, understanding, and perspective. My example means it's so easy, and I see this in the academy a lot. It's so easy to say, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. You're not doing it right. That's so easy. It's so much more difficult to build something yourself. It's like, oh, this is why my community members have such a difficult challenge in building these institutions. It's hard. And so I'll give a personal example. You know, we know that K-12 education is largely a disservice to our communities. We have the data to prove that. And so myself and some of my comrades, my squad, we say, look, let's do a school. And in doing it, there's a realization that, oh, this is harder than it looks. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. If you want to see change and development in your community, the best way to do it is by your example. I can't make anybody do better. I can't force anybody to do better, but I can give them and live a life that is an example that can show them this is a better way to do it.
Thank you. So our next question is from Melissa. Melissa asks, when conducting research to help our communities, what advice do you have for our research to gain admiration? There's so much literature out there. How do we make it stand out and make a difference?
Great question. Thank you so much for it. I think there's two things I would say here. One, I think we have to always examine and analyze the intentionality behind the work that we do. Knowledge without character is like a ship without water. To have knowledge but to lack character ends up producing the quality of life that our people have. You would be surprised, you might be surprised, if I told you many of the criminal injustice policies and procedures that America's criminal justice system adopted in the 80s and the 90s were actually policies that were developed, researched, and prescribed by higher ed. Shocking. Higher education institutions have functioned to justify and to prove and to maintain racist systems, okay? So I say that to say, we should be thinking about the kind of research that can provide functional benefit to our communities, okay? Functional benefit. Research that we can actually give to our communities who don't have access to the research. So if you think about higher ed, right? What the typical cycle is, right? If you're a researcher, you do your research, you go to your master's program, your PhD program, you write your dissertation, you get your PhD, then you become a professor, or you maybe get a decent job. 9 times out of 10, however, that research that you've done about your community never actually touches the community that you are researching. And in that way, the higher ed institution and you unintentionally, as an extension of the institution, become like a colonizer, where the colonizers will go in and look at African tribes and, oh, they're savage and they need to fix this and da da da, and never actually live in the community, never actually provide anything that change and improve the community. And so the research that we do should be research that has practical and functional benefit to the communities from which we come. And it should practically and functionally engage, and this is very important, it should be practically and functionally mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. A lot of times when we conduct research only with the goal of production, because that is what the society we live in teaches us. It's produce, 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 produce. It doesn't matter whether or not your research actually makes people's quality of life better, just make some research. That's the institution. So you have to think about, how do you do research that actually will create a functional benefit to our communities? And if you do that, I believe it would make the difference. And the reason it will make the difference, because there's functional benefit in it. Your community will recognize the value of your research. Think about how many Black and brown PhDs there are. It ain't a lot proportionally, but there's enough. How many Black and brown PhDs there are, and how many people in our communities know who they are. Think about how many people from our communities have left and gotten their PhD, but the community never sees any benefit from that investment. So we have to be thinking about, if I'm going down a lane of research, how can I do research that will actually bear a functional and meaningful and relevant benefit to our communities? The scholarship that we produced in the 70s, largely in the early 80s, sought to do that in a lot of ways, sought to produce scholarship that could be functional. Carter G. Woodson, the father and founder of Black History Month, he did functional research. He really taught Black people and wrote in a way that the everyday Black person could understand something new about their history. Well, how do we do our writing? Is our writing accessible? Are we using language and jargon that only those in the academy can understand? Are we publishing books that only those in the academy can grasp and read? Are we giving interviews that community members need a dictionary to understand? Right? How are we making ourselves useful? And we have to think, in the eyes of our community, what are we good for? Or are we good for nothing? We don't want to be good for nothing. We want to be good for the benefit of our communities.
Thank you. So another question that was brought from Alexandra, or Alex. You spoke about the responsibility we have to educate ourselves in our histories. In what ways can we start that process and know we are learning the true history our ancestors experienced?
It's a great question. The short answer is read. And I know in college it'd be so many readings, but you have to make it a priority. Take some time at some point every week to do some study of your own people. And if that's reading an article, if that's pick up a book and you'll read it over the course of the semester, but set goals for yourself. You have to read. And and I have a story here. Sometimes we find the greatest challenge in reading stuff that's about ourselves. ABC, which is the statewide Black Student Union Collective, a few years ago, we made it mandatory that everyone had to read a book to come to the conference. And the amount of pushback, a book about black people, Black history, and the amount of pushback we received was shocking almost. Because a lot of folks are like, man, I can't read this. I don't have time. The book may be 150 pages, and I understand that that's a real reading. And and what I told one person one time, I said, look, when you go to your English professor and they give you 10 books, and out of the 10 books to read, all of them are by white authors, nobody complains and says, I don't want to read this. When you go to your science professor and the science professor gives you 10 readings and every reading is by a non-person of color, we don't make a complaint. So how is it that we make such a difficulty out of reading literature and materials that are for and about us? We have to prioritize them. We have to say to ourselves, I must know some of this information, because if we don't, we will unintentionally become part of the problem and not part of the solution.
Thank you. So we also have some questions that we wanted to ask you as well as a staff. And so one of our questions is, sometimes students believe they do not have a voice in institutions that weren't built for them. What are some forms of advocacy that we can engage in as undergraduates?
That's a great question. Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, one of the founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he had a phrase that I love. He said, organize, 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 period. Our people are not out-resourced. Our people are often out-organized. We have resources in our community, but our resources are not properly organized. And so what would I say? I would say, go and find a student organization on campus that you can work with and through in order to improve the quality of life of students on your campus. Additionally, I would say, in America, the poor have no voice. That's true. But we can develop a voice through the power of unity. That means, although as an individual, your voice might not be recognized, when you partner up and become a collective, the voice of the collective is much stronger in its ability to advocate for the individuals within that collective. It's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Thank you. We have a question from Kaylee. She asked, how does one find their purpose in life? As a college student, she knows that she wants to do so many things in life, but is not sure of what she's actually meant for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things here. Your purpose in life is usually going to be a thing that you love doing and that you do best. That you love doing and that you do best. So as a young person, one of the things that you should start doing is just be busy, do things. And as you do things and you experiment, right, you'll begin to find and identify things that you love more than other things, okay? And one day, you should sit down and take an inventory of yourself. Seriously, like sit down and write down the things that you love to do and write down the things that you don't love to do. What is the common thread between the things that you love to do? And a lot of times you'll be able to see what are some of the deeper meanings and purposes that you have there.
And so, thank you. We have another question from Alex Del Toro. In hindsight, if you could redo your Cal experience, what would you have changed or done differently? And then a follow-up question, would you choose to go to Cal again or another university?
Okay. I'll answer the second question first. Um, I will go to Cal again. When I went to Cal, I didn't want to go to Cal. My mom made me, and I wasn't old enough to fight to resist. So I went to Cal. And honestly, while I was there, I really enjoyed my experience, and I really developed as a leader and as a person. And I'm very thankful for that. I really don't like Cal anymore, and I don't particularly ever desire to go back. But while I was there, I enjoyed it, and I lived it up to the fullest. All right, so that's why I went to Cal. In hindsight, if I could redo my experience, what would I have done differently? Honestly, I enjoyed most of my class. I devoted the bulk of my time and my energy to my work as a student leader, as a Black student leader, and I'm happy with that. And I think that spoke to my life's trajectory, and it spoke to what I wanted to do with my life most. And it gave me my chops, meaning that I earned my stripes. I had to go through the fire of difficulty and pressure and resistance, and it built me in some ways. Now, what I would do differently, I think the only thing I would do differently is I would change my major. I would choose a different major. And I actually have a point to make here. When I entered Cal, I entered Cal pre-business, and I changed to pre-law. And over time, I eventually made my own major and did race and law in the United States. Now, there's a couple of points here. If I could redo it, I would stick with creating my own major, and I would more so study like organizational development, and like something along those lines, in business. But I do want to touch on the reason that I changed my major. And I changed my major largely because as I was a devoted student leader, Black student leader, and that was largely my priority, I needed to have a major that I knew I could balance with my time devotions. And in addition to that, there were various encouragements from counselors and staffs. They kind of told me, here's some easier routes to do this. And I think the point that I want to make here is that a lot of times it's easy for us to be dissuaded from the pathway or the trajectory that we found ourselves on. And I want to advise us to try not to let that happen. Our communities are largely shepherded away from the STEM fields and some of the hard sciences. We're largely shepherded away from agriculture and agribusiness, right? And these are things that our communities back at home absolutely need in order to be more successful. How is it that our communities are food deserts? How is it that our communities don't have access to any quality food? What is that? Don't we have an obligation to serve that need? I'm reminded of Che Guevara in his biography by Mr. Anderson. I forget his first name, Chris Anderson, maybe. In Che Guevara's biography, there's a excerpt of an article Che wrote after the Cuban Revolution as they were working to build the society and to build a new nation state. And what Che talked about, he said, when you're building a nation state, we have to prioritize the most essential items and professions first. And Che, who's a doctor by trade, Che talks about at this time, we need doctors, we need engineers, etc. And he calls students, he says, listen, if you're majoring in art, if you're majoring in some of the social sciences and whatnot, Che kind of calls them and says, listen, what we need right now isn't art or social science. What we need right now, the most right now, we need folks who can help us build a better community. And I will offer a similar perspective as Che, and that's what our communities need right now is often not what our communities are what students are majoring in, truthfully. A lot of times we're not positioned in majors that can reap tangible, measurable impact once we leave the campus for our communities, right? And so I think it's important for us to think about, sometimes how we are shepherded into certain areas. We're disproportionately represented in like sociology in the social sciences field, right? And some of that is a quality about K-12 education, et cetera. But some of that is a culture that's often developed on campus that dissuades Black students from those type of fields. I think it's really, really important for us to have a broad base where we have young leaders who can tackle the many challenges of our communities in the 21st century with the most up-to-date resources.
Thank you. So we have a question from one of our student coordinators who had to go to class, but she wanted to ask, do you think being from Oakland in specific has molded you in some type of way, culturally or politically?
Absolutely. I'm from East Oakland, California. It is the place. It's my home, and I think there's a couple of ways that it molds and shapes me. One is when I was in high school, my 11th, maybe my 12th grade year. My 11th or 12th grade year, Oscar Grant was murdered by the BART Police Department in Oakland, California. And my father was very much so engaged and was a leader of that movement. And I was very near, and I was very present, and I was very like in it, you know, 2 feet deep. And I think what that did was kind of shape for me understanding of the world we live in and what it takes for our people to get justice. Um, his murderer, Johannes Messerly, was the first and only California police officer to ever be charged and convicted for the murder of a Black person, armed or unarmed, always unarmed, right? And in that process, I learned how hard it is on one side to lead, on another side to fight for a people's and a community's justice. And so it really informed my understanding of what's real. You know, I think a lot of times we can get to campus and we can get so divorced from the real life and real experiences of our communities that we forget what's really going on. We forget what the hood is like. We forget, you know, the kind of challenges our people face. And so growing up in Oakland, really, I will permanently and forever have a constant memory of and a constant reminder of the practical and functional condition our people find ourselves in. And as a result, you know, I'll never, God willing, you know, I don't ever intend to live and to work and to be in a situation where I'm completely divorced from supporting the development and the rise of my people.
Thank you. So another question that we have as staff, do you have any advice on how to navigate higher education for students classifying as minorities?
Yeah, my advice would be don't quit. Don't quit. People are relying upon you, right? And to always think about the larger context in which you fit, you know? Yes, it's difficult, but you got to understand it's not easier if you quit. That's the truth. If you fall out, it's not easier. It's harder. It doesn't feel that way when you're thinking about it. But if you really sat down and rationally processed it, it's harder, right? So one is don't quit. Two is create strong cultural hubs to support and develop yourself. You know, the campuses often, as institutions, negate and neglect the cultural sustainability of our communities on campus. And I think it's up to us in a lot of ways to create and maintain those spaces. You know, the truth is the campus doesn't know and doesn't care to ensure our survivability in some ways, right? In terms of like the larger meta narrative, right? It's our responsibility to know and care for that. And so I think it's really important that we are able to understand and identify the fact that we do have this invisible tax on us. As one scholar, Jarvis Gibbons, put it, we have this invisible tax on us where we have the tax of not just being a student, but also making our student life a worthwhile experience. You should know that that is the tax, that is the burden that we have on us. And, you know, you really have to find ways of supporting and developing and ensuring that your soul, and you can have peace and rest in that environment. So create clusters, create cultural community, so that you can have support.
Thank you. Another question coming from Alex Del Toro. Do you see yourself ever running for a political role in your community, or do you see yourself staying as a community organizer / activist?
In some ways, I consider myself neither. Political role, no, because I think that the dynamics of the political system are so skewed that even when we get in those offices, we're not able to get in and serve. And this is why we can have a Black president and Black people not benefit. In fact, Black people be the only ones to not benefit from a Black president. It's because the system itself isn't particularly designed to produce that type of output, regardless of the input. Now, in terms of an activist, I don't particularly see myself as an activist per se, because I just take difference to the sort of political activism that we often see, which is based in and rooted in trying to get the government's institutions, private institutions to care more about our communities. I think it's a exercise in futility. On the other hand, I'd rather engage in a way that says, listen, we have to build better communities and realities for ourselves. We cannot continue to rely upon an unreliable system and unreliable people in that system to make our community better. It's just not happening. It hasn't happened, and there's no indication that it will happen. And so for me, it's more perspective is like, okay, public schools aren't teaching our children the knowledge they need to be successful. Let's open a better school. We don't have grocery stores in our community. Let's open a grocery store. We don't have quality restaurants in our community. Let's open a quality restaurant. We don't have access to workout facilities. Let's get access. We don't have food during the pandemic. Let's provide food, etc. So my sense and sentiment is more, we have to find the willpower to take the harder journey, the stonier journey of building things for our own communities.
Thank you. We actually have a question coming in from one of our scholars, Jennifer. She asked, do you have any advice for sociology majors in regards to responding to people who will bash on sociology majors, such as saying that sociology has no importance and will not pay you well?
Okay. I'll do the second part first. Will Soch pay you well? I think generally, if you graduate a UC degree, you're earning far more than somebody that doesn't. That's really the bottom line. Now, there is some economics here. There's some true economics here, right? Certain majors do have higher entry level wages. That is a fact. I would not lie to you and tell you that it isn't, right? Certain fields, if you're in them, your entry level wager is $90, $100, $110, $120,000 with a bachelor's. That's not necessarily the case with a social degree, but it doesn't mean it's not doable. Okay. So the first thing is I have to be honest, right? I believe in telling the truth regardless of whom or what. Now, if somebody's bashing social and saying, it has no importance, I wouldn't say social has no importance, right? I think the study of our society and our social interactions is important. But I would say, on the other hand, however, I would say that the way social is taught, I've taken social classes, the way social is taught and the way we often engage with social often doesn't give our communities the empowerment necessary to change our communities. I think it's important to study our social dynamics and social relations, but I think it's more important to study and understand how do we change those dynamics and relations. And I think if you can focus your studies more along those ends, then you can make it something that has meaning and importance to your community at large. I think the last thing I would say is, if somebody has a negative critique or concern or issue around your major, in some ways I would say, so what? It's your life to live, and if your major is right for you, it's right for you. And if your major is not right for you, and you think it's right for you, you'll find out later. Life is a journey. It's a path. And there isn't necessarily one only one way to go through that path, right? It has many different roads, many different options. So you take your journey in life, and as you grow and as you develop, and as you age and you find wisdom, you'll find out whether or not it was a good major for you or not. I can't be the one to tell you that that is the major for you, because I think that's dependent upon you. But I think your life's journey will tell you.
Thank you. I actually want to take this time to talk to any scholars. If you have any questions for Brother Salih, please be sure to add them into the chat. That way we can ask them. But we are going to be wrapping up soon. So if you have any final dire questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to write them. But we do have a question coming from Jasmine, one of our coordinators. She asked, did you have some kind of outlet going through your academic career? For example, doing sports, arts, etc. And how did this help you, or how did you relax after a stressful day?
It's a great question. This is something I actually had to learn over time. The way I believe I'm built in some ways is that I'm 100% in, particularly when it comes to the service of my people. And again, in a lot of ways, that was my priority undergrad. It's my priority now. My priority is always my roots, the earth from which I came. So I had to learn this. And probably the first year and a half of doing BSU, I had very little outlet. And I remember very specifically one day my body gave out. My chest started hurting. I couldn't get out of bed. I literally must have slept for 16, 17 hours straight. And I realized, okay, I do have to do something in order to maintain this wonderful edifice that God has given me called my body. So things that I've learned to do, I'm not a huge proponent of the whole like self-care movement. So I think in the way I've seen it many times with our people, is that it becomes an excuse to not work, and an excuse to not develop our communities, and an excuse to not meet our duties and obligations. And I just don't believe in that. But my teacher taught me, never like my mom said, he said one time, he said, when you're sick, work. If you're depressed, work. If you're sad, work. If you're happy, work. If you're rich, work. If you're poor, work. Work is the solution to many of our problems, many of them. And so I really developed a sense and a sentiment that work is what I have to do. I am always working for the most part. Now, in the midst of that, I then learned, okay, there's some skills to knowing when to gas and when to release the gas, right? Not necessarily break, but to release the gas. And there's times where you need to break, right? And so what I did in college, at the beginning of every semester, work was on a semester system. At the start of every semester, when my refund check came in, I would get a massage, a nice 90-minute massage at the start of every semester, and it was ritual, it was routine. And I would also plan, anytime I felt myself like working a lot in a given week, I would just plan like a little activity for myself. And so in college, what that looked like, it typically looked like going to the movies or taking myself to dinner. And sometimes I would do it just by myself. As an adult, I have a slightly wider range of strategies I can do now. As an adult, when I need those breaks, those moments, I usually try to hold off, but I'll probably take a vacation every year with my family. And I think that helps to just give a moment where I don't have to focus and prioritize the work alone. And when I go on vacation, when I take a break, what I am good for, everything shuts down. I don't respond to text messages. I don't respond to emails. My phone's on airplane mode. I don't even see the text messages. It's a complete de-stress. Now I just cut off all access for anybody that might give me a stressful day. How did I relax after a stressful day? In college, I think in some ways today still, in college, after a stressful day, working out is huge. I just read a piece in the New York Times. I just saw a piece in the New York Times. They're saying working out 4 days a week can help to combat symptoms of depression. There is a real truth that physical activity is part and parcel mental and spiritual stability, and so I think it's really important that you get adequate exercise and sunlight. because these things can help to bring the body and the mind stability. I believe very much so in the concept of alignment, which means not only do I need to focus on like the political work that people will call, I have to do the political work, I have to do the personal development work, I have to do the physical development work, I have to do the spiritual development work, right? There's all these sides of what we consider ourselves, right? Of who we are. There's these many different dynamics. And it's very important for us to serve each of those dynamics in the way that it needs to be served, right? There's a side of you that just needs love and affection. And it's important for you to know when you just need to go with those people who are going to give you love and affection. There's a part of your internal self that needs to get exercised, the part of your being, right? That needs that. And it's important to know when you got to get up and make that kind of thing happen. So those things I did. I also, did I do anything else? I enjoy the water. So I like swimming. So undergrad, I took a swimming class every semester. Because I knew by taking it as a class, it would force me to really take it seriously. Because if I missed it too many times, they would give me a 0 and I wouldn't pass the class, and I didn't need no unnecessary fails. So as an undergrad, I took a swimming class too. And now I'll try to do those kind of things when I can.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being willing to sit here with us and have this talk. Thank you for the information and content that you have given us all, and for answering all the questions. And so if anyone has any further questions for Brother Salih, we will be giving his social media contact if you want to reach out to him through there. But I just want to say thank you so much. Also, before I pass it back over to Alex, our program coordinator, I just want to remind all of our scholars that we will be having an evaluation form for the event. So that link is going to be sent here in the chat. So please feel free to fill that out and just indicate that you were at the talk on April 9th with Brother Salih. Overall, thank you.
Thank you all so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I hope you did too.
Yes, thank you, Brother Salih. It was such a great talk, and we're so excited to share this talk later with others once we post it on the Vox file. But yeah, so do you have any other closing thoughts that you want to leave with our scholars?
I think I'll reiterate what I said earlier from Amico Cabral, and that he said, tell no lies and offer no easy solutions to the masses. We have a real struggle ahead of us, and our people have real conditions and experiences, and we can't lie to ourselves. We have to understand that it is hard to make our communities better, but we have that obligation.
Yes, thank you so much. And like Melissa says, we feel empowered. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. We're so lucky and blessed that you were our first speaker to start us off. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you all enjoyed. I really am.
Yes, so that concludes our first speaker series. So thank you all that joined. We're really grateful that you took the time out of your day to join us, and also you, Brother Salih. And we'll see you next week, everybody, for our next session. And our next session, I believe, is with Lisbeth. Yeah, with Lisbeth Santana. She is a PhD candidate at UC Davis, and she helped organize the murals in Tijuana that are interactive and that showcase the stories of deported adults. So it's going to be a really good talk as well. So we'll hope to see you next week. Spread the word, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.